The blade slipped from my hand before I even knew it. It clattered against the counter with a sound sharper than it should have been, like it had something to say. I looked down and saw the apple half peeled, juice trailing across the cutting. Bored, like it was trying to escape. I'd peeled apples 1,000 times in this very kitchen, same knife, same motion, same quiet afternoon light coming through the window. But today, my hand trembled, not from age, not from strain, from something else. The hum of the old fridge filled the silence, steady and familiar, but it did nothing to settle the rush in my chest. I bent slightly, one hand still sticky with juice, and stared at the blade like it might give me an answer. It gleamed too bright in the sunlight, too cold, too final. I didn't move, not right away. I just stood there, the scent of fresh apples rising around me, my heart loud in my ears. It wasn't the knife that had cut me. It was something else entirely, something I hadn't seen coming. And in that quiet, with the apple still unfinished, I felt a loss I couldn't quite name yet. But I knew it was mine. At first, I thought, he was just taking a work call. That polished voice he puts on, the one that makes people believe he has it all figured out. It echoed through the wall, clear as a bell. But then I heard my name. Not Mom, not even Mother. Just my name, like a placeholder in a report. She's sweet, but useless, he said. And then he laughed, light, dismissive, like he was talking about an old lamp that still works, but doesn't match the new decor. I stopped breathing for a second. The wind tugged at the curtain behind me, and the sound of it brushing the window pane felt louder than his words. But not stronger. That voice, that version of him, it wasn't meant for me. It was for whoever was on the other end of that call. A colleague, maybe, or someone he was trying to impress. Either way, the way he said my name didn't sound like love. It sounded like I was forgetting, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like wallpaper in my own home, present, but unnoticed. He didn't even say it with anger. That's what made it worse. He just said it like it was a fact, like it belonged in the same sentence as the weather or what time the meeting started. Useless. The word sat heavy in the air, heavier than it had any right to. I stood at the stove, the scent of cinnamon from earlier now, just a memory in the air. And everything felt cold. The kind of cold that comes from the inside out, like when you've stood too long in the rain and didn't notice until it was too late. That word didn't scream. It didn't shove. It sank. Quietly. Deeply. I leaned a hand against the counter, steadying myself, not from weakness, but from the weight of that single casual word. I'd held my breath through plenty in life. But this folded me from the inside, like a napkin no longer needed at the table. He didn't mean to break me. That's what made it so easy for him to do it. The apple rolled. Just a slow, soft bounce off the counter, then onto the floor. It hit the cupboard with a gentle thud, like it had given up trying to stay whole. I watched it spin on the linoleum, round and red and suddenly unfamiliar. It looked so small, so misplaced. Funny, how a piece of fruit could seem more noticed than me. I didn't move. My hands were still sticky, juice drying between my fingers. My body felt frozen, not from fear, but from a grief I couldn't explain yet. The moment hung there. One breath before, I was a mother peeling apples. One breath after, I was something else. I knew things would change. Life does that. But I never thought it would be him who'd draw the line between before and after. That apple came to a stop near my foot. I didn't pick it up. I couldn't. Because that moment wasn't about apples anymore. The house was still. Just the low groan of old pipes and the ticking of the wall clock. I sat on the edge of the sink, the ceramic cool against the back of my legs, and in that silence, the memories came, faster than I could hold, him with scraped knees and tears holding his arms out for comfort. Me tying his tie for his first real job interview, steady hands while he trembled. Late nights at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of cocoa and a boy who once told me, "You always know what to say." I thought about all of it, each moment a brick in the foundation I thought we still stood on. I didn't raise a cruel man. I raised a kind one. Or so I believed, but cruelty doesn't always come in shouts. Sometimes it arrives dressed as indifference, a shrug, a laugh, a careless word over the phone, and I sat there, dry-eyed but hollow. I had given him everything. And somehow it wasn't enough to keep him from forgetting what I was worth. The breeze slipped through the window screen, gentle and cool. It stirred. The wind chimes on the porch, their soft clinking like voices I used to know. I stood in the kitchen, still surrounded by the scent of peeled apples and fading cinnamon. The light outside was turning pink, the sky doing its best to soothe something. It couldn't reach, no one knocked. Not him, not anyone. And I looked around at what I'd built. Casserole dishes stacked neat in the cupboard, recipe cards worn soft by love and repetition, a fridge full of meals no one asked for anymore. For a moment, I almost believed him. Almost. But I remembered something else. My hands. What they'd made. Who they'd healed. How many hours they held others up before they ever asked for rest. He didn't see it. But I did. I wasn't waiting for his recognition anymore. The porch swing moved on its own, rocked gently by the wind. And I let the quiet hold me, not as punishment, but as proof. I had so many things, and useless was never one of them. I wasn't just someone's wife or someone's mother. I was Margaret Winslow. I wore ambition like other women wore pearls, close to the heart, but meant to be seen. My blazer was navy wool with gold buttons. The lining was silk, and the shoulder pads made me look broader than I felt. My heels echoed across the marble lobby of Pine Street every morning, sharp and certain, like punctuation marks in the sentence I was writing for myself. The receptionist would hand me a fresh folder and say, "They're already waiting, ma'am." The scent of brewing coffee filled the elevator, and the hum of typewriters waited behind every door. My desk sat near the windows, sunlight dancing on chrome surfaces. Before meetings, I'd smooth my skirt, take a breath, and walk into rooms, where my presence changed the air. Men paused when I entered, not because of a smile, but because my numbers held weight. My models were clean, my charts made sense, my logic made them lean forward and listen. That's how I liked it, not loud, not flashy, but unmistakably necessary. Those mornings gave me something I never lost, proof. Proof that I mattered before anyone ever needed me to. That day, the boardroom was buzzing like a hornet's nest, pages shuffling, voices rising, phones ringing down the hall, a division on the edge of collapse. Too many zeros, not enough answers. The CEO looked pale, tapping, a pen against his mug. Someone spilled coffee near the corner of the table, and no one noticed. I stepped in quietly. My 5-page memo tucked neatly into a folder pressed flat against my side. The room didn't hush for me, at least not at first. But when I slid the papers across the glass table, the tapping stopped. Conversations stuttered. One by one, heads turned. "Where'd this come from?" someone muttered. "Margaret's desk," another said. Every number had been double-checked. Every forecast built from the floor up, no fluff, just a clean, hard truth. As they read, the air shifted. I remember the CEO's eyes meeting mine after the second page. He didn't speak, just nodded, slow, like a man realizing something important. A bit too late. That memo didn't just save a company. It reminded me that even in the storm, I could be the still point that held. We called it lunch, but it was a strategy on plastic trays. Spaghetti with meatballs, garlic bread folded in napkins, and strong espresso in little white cups. No gossip, just ideas. Who was moving departments? which VP didn't understand risk models, and what we'd do if they gave us the room. One woman wore cherry red lipstick every day, even on Wednesdays when the lights in the cafe were too bright. Another had a laugh that could slice through office tension like a box cutter through tape. When we laughed, it wasn't for show, it was survival. We shared numbers and secrets like they were currency. Someone always had an extra pen. Someone always knew when you needed one more bite before going back in. I belonged there. We all did. Not because someone gave us permission, but because we claimed the space. Even now, I can still taste the marinara, still hear the buzz of ambition in our voices. I pulled it from the back of the closet gently, like it might bruise. Navy wool, gold buttons, still holding its shape after all those years. I laid it on the bed and ran my hand across the sleeves, slowly. I told myself it was temporary, just until his fever broke, just until that reading problem got sorted, just until second grade, but just until turns into what happened before you know it. I folded the blazer with care, as if the fabric might still remember boardroom chairs and long walks across lobbies. It smelled like lavender sachet from the drawer and something older, something like ambition. Faint, but still there. I laid tissue paper between the folds like I was packing away a version of myself. Not gone. Just shelved. The lamp by the saw. Closet cast a warm, buttery light on the fabric as I closed the box. My chest tightened. Not from regret exactly, but from the weight of knowing what I was leaving behind. Sometimes goodbye doesn't sound like a door closing. Sometimes it's just the soft rustle of sleeves finding each other in the dark. I climbed up to the attic one afternoon, looking for an old photo album. I had to move 3 bins of Halloween costumes, a busted rocking horse, and a Christmas wreath still tangled with last year's lights before I found it. Tucked behind. The far corner like it was hiding on purpose. My briefcase. I hadn't seen it in years. But there it was. Leather dulled at the edges, brass latch still holding strong. I sat cross-legged beside it and brushed off a fine layer of dust. The scent of cardboard, cedar, and something sharp, ink maybe, rose up as I opened it. The tabs were still color-coded. Notes in the margins of old spreadsheets are still legible in my careful hand. I didn't read everything. I didn't need to. I remembered the deals, the deadlines, the fire in my chest when I knew I was right. I closed it gently, the latch clicking like punctuation. That case wasn't a relic. It was a promise, one I hadn't broken, even if the world had forgotten it, was made. The bathroom was quiet, just the soft drip of the faucet and the creak of the floorboards under my slippers. I caught my reflection in the mirror, hair pinned up, robe sleeves pushed to my elbows, circles under my eyes that hadn't faded in years. I'd just finished packing school lunches, peanut butter and grape jelly, crusts cut off. There was a note in one that said, "Good luck on your quiz." I'd tucked it between the sandwich and the apple slice like a small secret. Even as I packed those bags, I'd been running calculations in my head. Grocery budget, mortgage rate, college fund if we skipped the vacation. My brain never stopped. Doing the math, even when my hands were making meatloaf. I looked into the mirror and whispered it before I could talk myself out of it. You still matter, not for the casserole, not for the bedtime stories, but for the woman who had a mind before anyone else needed her hands, for the woman who never stopped carrying both. The brown paper bag was still warm in my lap as I rode the elevator up. I'd wrapped the sandwich in wax paper, just like I used to when he was in 5th grade. Turkey and cheddar, a little note tucked in the fold that read, "Don't forget you're human." I don't know why I wrote that. Maybe I just needed to say something more than, "Love, Mom." I held that bag like it carried something sacred. Not just lunch, not just food. Something older than that. Something I thought might still matter. The elevator hummed softly as the numbers lit up one by one. My reflection stared back from the polished metal doors, hair fixed, lipstick neat, hands folded around a bag of hope. I remember the smell of it, bread still warm from the toaster, wax paper holding the scent in. It cut through the sterile air of the building like a whisper. Foolish, maybe, but I felt proud. I was doing something for him, something small, but from my hands. I just wanted to feel useful, needed, even for 1 minute. He didn't look up. I stood at his desk. The lunch bag held out gently like it might break if I moved too fast. "Thanks, Mom," he muttered, fingers still flicking across his screen. His eyes never left it, not even for a second, not even for me. The room was quiet. Just the soft tapping of keyboards, the hum of machines, and the sound of my heart slowing down. I waited, still holding the bag for half a beat too long, unsure if he meant for me to put it down or just vanish. He didn't say anything else. "No." "How are you?" "No." "Want to sit for a bit?" Nothing. I set the bag down beside his monitor, careful not to cover any of the papers he was focused on. He kept scrolling, kept reading, kept being someone I didn't recognize. I stood there, feeling like I had just interrupted a meeting I was never invited to. And then I realized, maybe I had. I lingered, pretended to fumble with my purse, like maybe I had something else to give. Maybe he'd notice. Maybe he'd say, "Sit down, Mom," and we'd talk, even just for a few minutes. But the moment dragged on. The space between us stretched like heavy fabric, thick and unmoving. I glanced at the chair beside his desk. Empty, rolled slightly out like it was waiting. But he didn't gesture toward it. He didn't offer. I stared at it longer than I should have. That chair had hosted deals, meetings, maybe even laughter. But never me. Not anymore. Outside the window, the city moved fast. Cars streaming down. Below, people rushing somewhere they thought mattered. Inside, everything slowed. My hands went still. My breath is quiet. He didn't say a word, and I didn't push. I just let the silence grow. Because deep down, I knew it wasn't just that I didn't belong there. It was that he no longer thought I did. I had just turned to go when she walked in, tall, polished, heels clicking like punctuation on marble. Bright perfume announced her before her voice did. "Hey, Daniel," she smiled, and just like that, he came alive. His shoulders lifted, his tone changed. "Morning, Lauren," he said, like her name was something he'd been waiting to say all. He laughed, a little too loudly. He made a joke, something about the new project and how everyone was scrambling like amateurs. She laughed back, tapping her nails on his desk, and I stood there, only a few feet away, completely invisible. He had saved his best voice for her, not me, not the woman who taught him how to pronounce perseverance, not the one who held his hand through stitches, homework, and heartbreak. I watched their words move between them like a private current. And in that moment, I felt like I was standing outside a window I didn't know had been built. Looking in, not invited. I pressed the elevator button too many times, once, then again, like somehow it would make the doors come faster. The lunch bag was still in my hand. I hadn't meant to take it with me, but there it was, pressed tight between my fingers like proof of something I couldn't name. He hadn't even opened it, hadn't even asked what was inside. I looked down at it, the folded wax paper now slightly damp with heat and sweat. And I thought, why did I come? The elevator finally dinged. The doors slid open with a soft whoosh. I stepped in and didn't turn around, didn't look back, didn't give him the chance to notice I'd gone. And as the doors closed in front of me, sealing me into that mirrored box of quiet humming and old regrets, I realized he'd shut me out long before the doors did. I had planned to stop for tea, just a small ritual, one I liked after doctor visits, errands, or city days, Earl Grey with honey, a sugar cookie shaped like a flower. The cafe on the corner always smelled like bergamot and fresh baked things. But today, my feet kept walking, past the bell that jingled as someone else walked in, past the window where an older man read a newspaper, steam rising from his cup. The scent caught me as I passed, warm, comforting, familiar, but it couldn't touch me. The wind hit me harder than it should have. Chilly for spring, it slipped down my collar like something I couldn't stop. I tightened my coat. Keep walking. I didn't know where I was headed exactly, only that my appetite was gone and nothing sweet could reach the hollow that had opened up inside me. It was a photo. Bright and glittering and loud, even without sound. Champagne glasses raised, gold streamers falling like confetti rain. And there he was, Daniel, in a crisp black tuxedo, grinning like he owned the very air. My neighbor had posted it. So, "Proud of Daniel," the caption said, followed by a stream of exclamation points and little heart emojis. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. I wasn't invited. The laptop screen glowed too bright in the early evening hush, its light painting the wrinkles in my placemats and making the shadows in the corners feel deeper. I stared at his smile, how real it looked, how full of joy, the kind you share with the people who matter most. The tea beside me had gone cold. I hadn't even taken a sip. I closed the laptop slowly, not out of anger, just not to feel the sting of it anymore. And I sat there for a long time, staring at the place where his name had been written by someone else. The dress was still hanging. By the door, navy blue, with a little shimmer that caught the hallway light just so. I had it ironed 2 days ago, just in case. Not because he told me, but because I thought, maybe. I ran my hand down the fabric. It was smooth, warm from the afternoon sun that had touched it earlier. The scent of starch still lingered, mixed faintly with lavender from the sachet I kept in the coat closet. It wasn't a glamorous dress, but it made me feel like I still knew how to show up, like I still mattered enough to be seen. I held the sleeve gently, fingers brushing the seam where I'd once repaired a tiny tear, and then I let go. Not angrily, not dramatically, just like letting go of a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since the moment I saw that photo. It swayed, slightly on the hanger, as if the air had something to say, but I'd already heard enough for one night. The mug sat between my palms, barely warm anymore. I didn't really want it, but I held it anyway. It gave my hands something to do, something steady. The soft scent of chamomile rose up, mixing with the rain now tapping lightly against the window pane. No television, no music. Just the sound of the storm's breath and the creak of this old house settling in for the night. I took a sip out of habit. Not for comfort, just to fill the quiet with something. Anything. The flicker of the candle on the table made the room feel smaller, softer, but not kinder. I looked around, at the empty chairs, the unused napkins, the space that once felt full even when it was quiet, and I realized it wasn't just tonight. It has been happening for a while now, slowly, like a clock winding down. The house wasn't just empty. It had been learning how to live that way. I reached for a napkin, something to dab the corners of my eyes. Nothing. More, but the one I pulled from the drawer stopped me cold. It had a little rocket ship drawn on it in blue crayon, wobbly lines, big window, a tiny stick figure waving from inside, and right below it, in letters shaped like they were learning how to be brave, Mom. I'd kept it without thinking, years ago, just tucked it into the pile with the holiday-themed ones and the ones too fancy to use. And now, here it was, holding more love than anything he'd given me in years. I sat down at the table again, the napkin resting in my lap like a memory that had waited patiently to be seen. The tears came harder then, not from anger, not even from rejection, but from missing a boy who used to believe I was his whole universe. And maybe missing the version of me who believed that too. I didn't turn the lights off when I went upstairs. The kitchen stayed aglow in that soft yellow warmth, the kind that makes a house look like someone still lives there. Still hoping, still waiting. I told myself it was a habit, or safety, or comfort. But maybe it was a quiet signal. Maybe I wanted him to drive by just once and see those windows lit up. To wonder why he hadn't called, to feel some small flicker of guilt for the space that had grown between us. But the phone didn't ring, the house didn't stir, and I sat there watching the flickering light bulb sway slightly from the ceiling fan above, casting little shadows over my teacup and my hands. Outside, the rain had stopped, but inside, the stillness held on, and in that flickering silence, I stopped expecting him to notice, not because I didn't want him to, but because I finally understood. Sometimes the hardest part isn't being forgotten. It's realizing you were never remembered in the first place. It wasn't a special day. No errands to run, no appointments. Just this morning, I didn't want to waste sitting at home. I opened my closet and reached for the scarf. That scarf. Deep burgundy silk. The one Harold used to say made me look like I meant business. I hadn't worn it in years. Not since the holidays. I tied it carefully, smoothing the ends like I was preparing for something I couldn't name. As I stepped out, the breeze caught the fabric and made it flutter a little behind me, like it had somewhere to go. The cafe was tucked inside a bookstore I used to love. Sunlight filtered through the windows, casting soft stripes across the wooden floor. The scent of croissants and old paper greeted me like an old friend, and as I reached for the door handle, I remember thinking, maybe it's okay to show up like you matter, even if no one's waiting on the other side. She noticed me before the barista did. I'd barely stepped inside when she smiled. Young, smart eyes. A soft leather notebook opened in her lap, pen twirling between her fingers. "That scarf is stunning," she said, with the kind of sincerity that doesn't ask for anything in return. I blinked. "Oh," I said, fingers brushing the fabric. "Thank you. It's old. Classic," she replied. I ordered a tea and found a seat near hers, one of those cozy reading nooks with the mismatched chairs and bookshelves you just want to lean into. She kept talking, asked what I was reading, how my morning was. Then, gently, like it wasn't the first time she'd asked it, but maybe the first time it truly mattered, she asked, "What did you used to do?" Not, "What do you do?" Not, "Are you retired?" But what did you used to do? And somehow, just like that, she opened a door I hadn't expected to walk through again. I told her in pieces. How I used to balance ledgers most people were too afraid to open. How I advised firms through recessions and mergers and walked into boardrooms where no one saved me a seat. But I took one anyway. She listened like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like I hadn't grown invisible with time. "And you left that world?" she asked gently. "I stepped away," I said, "for a while, to raise my son. Then the while just turned into years." She nodded, not with pity, but with curiosity. She wasn't humoring me. She was listening to me. And in that moment, I felt something stir in my chest. Not sadness, no regret, just an ache I hadn't known I'd carried, that no one had asked in so long. It wasn't about proving myself. It was about remembering I didn't need to. When she said it, I almost laughed. "We need someone like you," she said softly. I smiled, mostly out of habit. "Well, I doubt your tech world needs someone with my filing cabinet brain." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "You know things they don't teach anymore," she said. "How to hold your ground, how to read risk, how to listen." There was something in her voice, a kind of quiet certainty, like she hadn't stumbled on me, like she'd been waiting to find someone just like me. I felt my fingers tighten slightly around my teacup. Not fear, not even a surprise. Just the first flicker of being seen in a way I hadn't been for a very long time. She didn't make a show of it, Just slid the card across the table as the barista called her name for a refill. Navy blue with her name in gold. Clean. Crisp. Real. Call me, she said, standing. If you get tired of being underestimated. I picked it up slowly, like it might vanish if I moved too fast. I read her name twice. Let it settle in my palm like a pebble warm from the sun. Then she was gone. But the moment wasn't. It stayed. I didn't put the card in my purse. I slipped it between the pages of a novel I'd brought with me. Chapter 12, where the main character finally chooses to stop waiting for someone to hand her permission. That felt right. I stood, gathered my things, and walked toward the door. The cafe bell jingled softly behind me, and the spring air outside smelled like lilacs and possibility. I wasn't young, but I felt seen. Not like a memory, not like a used to be, but like someone who still had something to offer, and maybe someone who was just getting started again. I bought a fresh notebook, not a digital planner or a spreadsheet, just a spiral-bound notebook with a sturdy black cover. I hadn't opened Excel in years, but something about that clean page made me feel 10 feet tall. At the kitchen counter, with the sun just creeping up through the blinds and the scent of toast in the air, I clicked my pen and started writing, scribbled. Questions. Loose math. A budget breakdown I'd half forgotten how to do. The ink smudged under my thumb like it used to when I worked late and fast, back when I carried a purse full of pens that never worked. There was nothing urgent on the page, just the beginning of something. And as I sat there, barefoot, hair still, damp from the shower, I looked at that first full line and thought, I may be slower now, but I'm not finished. Not even close. Some nights I took meetings in my bathrobe, lipstick still on from dinner, but slippers where my heels used to be. I'd click into Zoom calls with a stack of printouts, a cup of decaf, and a face full of determination. The young ones talked fast, moved faster, acronyms flew like sparks, but I listened faster. I asked questions they didn't expect, brought up angles they'd overlooked. There were pauses in the conversation, those moments when someone younger than my son realized I wasn't there to take notes. My guest bedroom had become a study. Legal pads stacked on the nightstand. My reading glasses never left my head. One night, after a long strategy call, I sat back and stared at the screen as everyone logged off. The room was quiet except for the low hum of my desk lamp and the gentle ticking of the old wall clock, and I said it softly to no one but myself. I still got it. In Houston, I wore 3-inch pumps I hadn't touched since the Bush administration. They pinched something awful, but they made me walk taller. I gave a pitch in a room full of suits, and I held their gaze like I used to, steady, clear, sharp. The slides flicked behind me, but I kept my eyes on them. They listened. In Denver, the hotel room was barely more than a closet. One of the lamps didn't work. The walls were so thin I could hear the man in 203 snoring. Still, I laid out my notes. On the bedspread and highlighted sections in the dim light, flipping pages with fingers that had learned long ago how to organize a storm. I remember brushing my hair before bed, catching my reflection in the chipped mirror over the sink. For the first time in a long time, I saw her again. The woman who used to close deals before lunch. The one who knew exactly what she brought to the room. I wasn't comfortable, but I was confident. Sticky notes became my battle plan. Yellow ones, pink ones, even green ones when I could find them. I stuck them to bathroom mirrors, hotel nightstands, and the inside covers of cereal boxes, phone numbers, quotes, math formulas, reminders. One said, "Breathe before you speak." Another, "He doesn't see you. Yet." I'd wake before sunrise, slip on a robe, and walk past the soft light of the street lamps outside the hotel window. The bed would still be warm, but my mind was already moving. I'd read my notes like, morning prayers, this was my rhythm now. One square at a time, one page at a time. No applause, no deadlines I didn't make myself. just quiet discipline and the click of a pen in the dark. The final papers didn't weigh much, just a few pages, 2 copies, a pen with blue ink and a glass of water sweating beside it. But when I pressed my thumbprint on the last page, it felt heavier than anything I'd ever signed. The merger was complete. The control was mine. I didn't cry, I didn't cheer, I just let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for 2 years. Long, full, free. The boardroom was sleek, floor-to-ceiling windows and polished wood, but all I could focus on was that feeling in my chest, stillness wrapped in certainty. Someone across the table said, "Congratulations." I nodded. Not to them, but to myself. Because the win wasn't just the signature. The win was that I'd come back and I didn't need anyone's permission to do it. They say people stop growing at a certain age, but I don't believe that. I grew in the layovers, in the bitter hotel coffee, in the silence of rooms where I didn't know anyone and no one cared who I'd once been. I grew in the early flights and the lonely dinners, in the little victories no one saw but me, in the margin notes and the missed calls and the moments I wrote myself reminders like, "You still know how to do this." The airport gate was quiet when I boarded my last flight home. Twilight glowed through the windows, turning everything soft and gold. I sat by the window, hands folded in my lap, watching the ground pull away as we climbed, and I thought, not with pride, but with peace. I'm not who I was, and thank God for that. The keycard slid like a whisper. 1. Soft beep, and the glass door eased open, slow and smooth, as if it had always been mine. No questions, no hesitation. Just access, clean and quiet. I held the card a second longer than I needed to. It felt cool in my hand, smooth, weighted not with plastic, but with every moment it had taken to earn it. The lobby smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and polished tile, shiny floors and fresher faces, the kind of place that once looked through me like I was part of the wallpaper, but not today. Today, I walked through those halls like I belonged, not loudly, not with a smile, just without apology. The receptionist barely looked up, and I didn't need her to. One step at a time, I moved forward, and every step said the same thing. I've earned this. Her smile dropped before she could catch it. His assistant, Lauren, I think, recognized me immediately, but not as the woman who once brought lunch in a brown paper bag. Her eyes flicked from my shoes to my folder, to my face. And then she stood. "Ms. Winslow?" I nodded, just once. I didn't offer an explanation. She didn't ask for one. She stepped aside like someone who just realized they were standing in the doorway of something bigger than they'd expected. I saw the confusion first, then something else. A glimmer of understanding, respect, maybe, or just awareness. That day, I wasn't here to visit. I was here to be seen, and I walked past her without breaking stride. Not out of rudeness, but because sometimes grace is just quiet motion in the right direction. He didn't rise. I stepped into his office, and the scent of his cologne mixed with the faint tang of printer ink. Sunlight cut sharp angles across his desk. He was mid-sentence, still talking to someone on speakerphone, until he saw me. "Mom?" His voice broke on the second syllable. I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked across the rug, soft wool, high pile, expensive, and laid the folder directly in front of him. Right between his overpriced fountain pens and a crystal paperweight that had more gloss than weight. The folder had a logo on it, ours, the new one. "I came to check on my investment," I said gently. No edge, no threat, just a fact. He stared at the logo, then at me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt taller than him, even sitting. I didn't need a chair. I already had the floor. He always had a comeback, a line, a smirk, some clever spin to keep control in the room. But not today. He blinked. Once. Then again. Like the sight of me sitting across from him didn't quite compute. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reckoning. He didn't ask why I was there. Didn't crack a joke. He just stared at the folder. And at me. I could almost see it. His brain catching up to something his pride had shielded him from for too long. For a man who always had the last word, this was new territory, and I didn't need to fill the space for him. The silence was doing just fine on its own. I smoothed my skirt before I turned to go. No hug, no lecture, no tidy little bow to wrap the moment in, just me, standing. I looked around the office once more, not to admire, but to mark. I'd walked into this space on my own terms. That was enough. I let the quiet linger. Then I turned and walked out, heels tapping softly on the polished floor. Not hurried, not hesitant, just done. The hallway was cool, the air steady. The hum of the vents echoed beneath my steps. Each click of my heels felt like punctuation, like the final full stop at the end of a sentence I'd been writing for years. Didn't look back. He knew I'd been there. That was all I needed. He'd stare at that folder later, run his fingers along the edge of the logo without meaning to. The new design, the firm I helped build, the partnership I helped secure, the shift he hadn't seen coming. My name wasn't on the front, but it was there if you knew where to look, in the structure, in the numbers. In the ink pressed deep into the contract, he hadn't read closely enough. I imagined him picking it up again, reading the bold letters, and finally understanding what they meant. She owns part of this. She earned this. She came back. I didn't need to see it happen. I didn't need him to call or explain or apologize, because I'd already lived the part he missed. I'd already rebuilt what he once dismissed. And the logo? That was more than a design. It was proof. Quiet, clean, and irreversible. The calendar alert blinked onto my screen just after 4. Emergency board meeting, 5:30 p.m. No context, no explanation, but I didn't need one. I could hear it between the lines, the tightness in his fingers. As he typed my name into the invite list, the bite behind the formality. This wasn't protocol. This was pride. I sipped my chamomile tea and watched the steam curl toward the soft light of the window. The cursor blinked beside the word accept. Clicked once and typed a single word in reply. Confirmed. No fluff, no tone, just presence. Then I closed the laptop and folded my hands in my lap. I didn't need to prepare. The truth doesn't need rehearsal. He leaned in like a man preparing to wrestle his way back into control. His voice was even, too even, strained at the edges, like a rope pulled too tight. I believe the recent merger was premature, he began, and potentially compromising the integrity of our long-term strategy. His words floated through the room like papers caught in a breeze. But there was no breeze, just silence and artificial air. He didn't look at me, not once. His eyes darted to charts, to the screen, to the legal pad he never touched. Anywhere. But mine. I listened. Not to his reasoning. It was thin, rehearsed, hollow, but to the fear underneath it. He wasn't addressing the room. He was trying to unwrite the moment. Trying to pretend he could control the story just because he used to own the pen. He gestured toward his attorneys as if they were shields, as if he could hide behind contracts and clauses he hadn't read as carefully as I had. They stayed still. One cleared his throat. Another shuffled papers, but the documents didn't lie. I had followed every step, dotted every I, and initialed every margin where it mattered. He referenced technicalities. They remained unmoved. The silence that followed his argument wasn't uncertain. It was certainty finally having its say. One lawyer, a senior partner with silver hair and a face like polished stone, glanced my way and gave the faintest nod. Not deference. Not agreement, just respect. recognition of a woman who had done her homework and dared to show her work. I met his eyes. Then I looked back at the table. Nothing needed to be said. The papers were speaking clearly enough. One by one, the hands rose. No murmurs, no glances for reassurance. Just quiet, steady movement. Each vote felt like a pebble dropped in still water, gentle, but impossible to undo. When the last hand lifted, I didn't smile. I simply folded my hands, just as I had earlier that day in my kitchen. The cool air from the vent above hit the back of my neck, and I felt my breath fog slightly in the filtered light. He dropped his pen, a soft clink against the glass table. It was a small sound. But in that moment, it was everything. The kind of sound that says you've lost. Not because someone beat you, but because you weren't ready for the truth to win. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, quiet in my reclaiming. The vote wasn't even close, and for the first time in a long time, neither was I. His face flushed, deep and sudden. Not with rage, but with the cold rush of realization. He looked around the table, scanning each face for something, support, rescue, someone to echo him back to the top of the room. But the silence was merciless. He opened his mouth like he might say something else, but the words didn't come. He was grasping for ground that wasn't there anymore. I watched his hands twitch, those same hands I once taught to write their name in block letters on lined paper. And all I could think about was the boy who once lost a spelling bee in 5th grade. How he stood on that stage, blinking, stunned, looking for a do-over that wasn't coming. He hadn't changed as much as he thought. He just grew taller. And the fall? Well, it feels longer when you're standing on something you thought no one could take from you. I stood, not abruptly, not as a performance, just with purpose. I gathered my folder, the one I had brought with quiet care, and tucked it under my arm. No raised chin. No smug nod. Just a woman who had walked through fire, not to prove a point, but to remember who she had always been. I looked around the room, faces I didn't need to impress, men and women who had finally seen what I already knew. Then I passed his chair. My fingers brushed the back of it, not to comfort him, not to pause, but to steady myself, because even justice, when it's long overdue, can shake your knees a little. He didn't look up, and I didn't need him to. I walked out through the boardroom doors, into the quiet of the hallway. The hush behind me wasn't empty. It was closed. I didn't win. I simply arrived. And sometimes, that's the greatest victory of all. He sat through the meetings like a ghost. Every morning, he came in on time. Tie neat, jacket pressed. But his voice lacked weight, like it had been drained of the certainty he used to wield so easily. The room had changed. People didn't look at him anymore. They looked at me. At first, I felt the shift like a draft in the room, subtle but unmistakable. Later, I realized it wasn't a shift. It was a return. He gave a presentation one morning, slides flicking across the screen behind him. Revenue numbers, projections, a decent pitch. But every few lines, his eyes flicked toward me, searching, as if trying to borrow my approval. As if he was unsure whether his words still held. I didn't nod. I didn't frown. I just listened, and he fumbled briefly when he lost his place, like a pianist realizing he's playing a piece. He didn't rehearse enough. He was no longer the man holding the reins, just a shadow in the room where I'd reclaimed the light. I let silence do the work. I didn't correct him in meetings. I didn't pull him aside. I didn't pat his shoulder and say, "It's okay," because it wasn't, and he needed to sit with that. He would stumble on terminology he once mastered, or suggest something short-sighted, the kind of thing I'd have challenged in a heartbeat years ago. But I let the silence stretch, let it press into the space between his words. He'd pause, mid-sentence sometimes, realizing something was missing. the echo of respect, the nods, the sense that people were following him because they believed in what he was saying. I could see it settle on him, the weight of absence, the discomfort of having to earn back what he once took for granted. I walked the office halls like I had, a lifetime ago, shoulders back, head high, not out of pride, but out of memory. The silence spoke louder than anything I could have said, and he was finally beginning to listen. We had coffee most mornings, 2 mugs, steam curling into the space between us like a boundary neither of us quite knew how to cross. Some days we talked about quarterly numbers, budget projections, staffing. Other days, we didn't talk at all. The silence wasn't hostile, it was tentative, cautious, like a bridge under slow, quiet repair. He stirred cream into his coffee with the same rhythm he had as a boy stirring cereal. Round and round, never too fast. I watched him, wondering, not for the first time, what version of my son was sitting across from me now. The one who had hurt me? The one who was learning? Maybe both. I'd sip mine slowly, letting the bitterness settle before swallowing. The sunlight filtered through the high windows and lit the edges of his face, catching the faint lines near his mouth that hadn't been there 2 years ago. We didn't apologize. We just sat. And sometimes that was enough. I passed by his office late one Thursday. Most of the building was dark, just a few hallway lights still buzzing overhead. But his door was open, and the lamp on his desk cast a soft circle of gold across his papers. He didn't see me. He was hunched over a folder, brow drawn tight, flipping pages like they mattered, like he was trying to understand, not just skim. No phone, no assistant, just him and the quiet hum of the city outside the window. Paused for a moment, just long enough to feel something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but maybe the first flicker of respect returning to its rightful place. I didn't knock, I just turned and walked away. My heels landed softer than usual on the tile. He didn't need to know I'd seen him working. The point wasn't to be noticed. It was knowing that maybe, finally, he was starting to try again. He came into my office without knocking. That was new. He held something in both hands, like it was fragile. It was my memo. From 83, yellowed a little at the edges but still sharp, 5 pages, neatly stapled, with the title in bold just the way I liked it. He looked at me, and for once his eyes didn't try to control the room. I read it, he said quietly. Then, softer. Your memo from 83? It was brilliant. His voice cracked just slightly at the end. I didn't move. Just looked at him, really looked, past the title, the salary, the stumbles, and I saw the boy who used to sit at the kitchen table while I typed, the one who used to ask, "What's a profit margin, Mom?" between spoonfuls of applesauce. The boy was still in there, buried beneath boardrooms and pride. He set the memo gently on my desk and stepped back. "I get it now," he said, and maybe, for the first time, he really did. I didn't hug him, didn't cry, didn't reach across the desk for his hand. I just nodded toward the extra chair. "Sit." He did. We talked shop, firm projections, a possible new hire, a strategy I wanted his opinion on, not because I needed it, but because he needed to offer it. And for the first time in a long while, he did. Thoughtfully. Measured. Like someone trying to contribute, not control. Something between us shifted, not all the way, not healed, but different. He wasn't just the man who'd called me useless anymore. He was the man who'd stayed late to study a memo from a woman he once overlooked. We didn't bring up the past. We didn't need to. Because forgiveness isn't a speech. It's a decision to stay in the room, to make space, to keep showing up. And as we flipped through reports, our coffees cooling on the sill, I thought, maybe the real lesson wasn't mine to teach after all. Maybe it was his to earn. It's the same paring knife, the one I used when he was little, back when his feet dangled off the kitchen stool and he'd ask if apples tasted different. When I cut them a special way, they didn't. But I told him yes. Now the blade is a little duller. The handle was worn smooth, but it still fits my hand just right. And my grip is steadier than it's ever been. Not because I've grown stronger, but because I've stopped apologizing for being strong. I slice through the skin in one slow spiral. The scent of tart apples rises up, mixing with cinnamon and the faint breeze from the window. Each curl falls into the bowl like a memory dropping back into place. I don't rush. I just peel and breathe and let the room fill with something that's mine, something I didn't have to fight for today. There's no noise, no proof, just peace, and a knife that still remembers exactly how I like things done. The view outside this kitchen is different now. No more bird feeders, no backyard fence, just steel and glass and rooftops stretching into a sky painted gold by the setting sun. The city hums below, soft, distant traffic like a lullaby that never fully ends. But I've changed too. This me doesn't wait by the phone, doesn't linger in silence hoping to be seen. This man builds the doors instead of knocking on them. I caught my reflection in the window earlier, not by accident, by instinct, and I didn't turn away like I used to. My hair's grayer. My face carries stories, but I look like I belong here, not borrowed, not temporary, planted, rooted in a life I didn't chase. One I built. And in that reflection, I saw something that can't be taken away. A woman who came back to her own table, pulled out the chair, and sat without asking permission. He stops by more often now, not with apologies, but with questions. He leans on the counter, sleeves rolled, and asks things like, "What would you do about the restructuring?" Or, "Do you think the market's shifting too fast?" He doesn't call me mom when we talk shop. Just listen. Really listens. Last week I poured 2 cups of tea. He was reading over a report. I handed him one and sat beside him like I used to in those late-night study sessions when he was 12 and didn't understand fractions. But now he asks about legacy funds, division leads, efficiency models, and I answer, calmly, clearly, without hesitation, not to prove anything, just because I can. He watches my hands when I speak sometimes, like he's remembering they used to hold things together before he even knew what the word budget meant. I don't need his validation, but I will take it, because respect, when it's offered without force, feels like breath instead of burden. He was drying dishes. We weren't talking, just the clink of plates, the low hum of the dishwasher, the hush of twilight settling into the room. He paused, holding a plate in both hands. And then, softly, so softly I almost missed it, he said, "I was wrong. That was all. No speech, no caveats. Just those 3 words, suspended in the stillness like something holy. I didn't freeze, didn't flinch. I took the plate from him and said, I know. Not to hurt him, but because I had known. All along, I didn't need it said aloud to believe it. But hearing it, it landed somewhere deep, not in triumph, but in grace. He dried his hands on a towel, nodded once, and reached for another dish. And that was that. No ceremony, just a small moment that felt like a door closing behind us and a different one, gentler, quieter, finally opening. I don't wait anymore. Not for recognition. Not for praise. Not for a seat at anyone's table. I peel apples because I like the scent. I grow herbs on the balcony because I like seeing something rise. I mentor younger women now, sharp ones. Ones who remind me of the fire I once buried, beneath casseroles and carpools. They don't always know how to carry their strength without apology. So I show them. Not through speeches, but through presence. I don't wear heels anymore. Doesn't carry a leather briefcase or slide reports across boardroom tables, but it walks with me, in every room, in every word. It never left me. It just got quieter, deeper, truer. And now, it fills the space I no longer shrink inside. Dinner was simple. 2 plates. Roasted vegetables, warm bread, a little soup. He asked a question about delegation. I answered. He nodded. I poured him another cup of tea. There was no tension, no wall, no rush. The city lights blinked outside, twinkling against the glass wall, like stars deciding to settle down for the night. I looked across the table and thought, this isn't a victory, it's balanced. I didn't win him back. I simply stayed standing long enough for him to finally see me clearly. No longer as mom, or the woman who stepped aside, but as someone whole and maybe, just maybe, someone he could finally meet eye to eye. Funny how a quiet kitchen and a few peeled apples can carry the whole weight of a life. If this story reminded you of a moment when you finally felt seen or stood quietly in your worth, I'd love to. Hear it in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, feel free to like and subscribe. I'll be right here, waiting to share the next one with you.